Hello and welcome to Bundesliga. Now, the Germans have their own national team. Yeah, it's sort of like the England team, but it's German and successful. Or is it? Because at the moment, the German national team is going through a crisis. And we're going to find out what it's all about in this video today. Okay, so the German national team, just to go through a bit of historical background on the German national team. As you might know, they won the World Cup in 2014, beat Argentina 1-0, and that tournament also featured the infamous 7-1 drubbing of Brazil and the Brazilian national team to this day. Where are we? 11 years later? Still not really recovered from that. But anyway, so the Germans were world champions again, and they carried on with manager Jogi Löw, who had done him and he's won on the World Cup. Okay, so yeah, sure. 2016 Euros, I think they were knocked out by France in the semis. But then came the 2018 World Cup in Russia, and the Germans didn't get through the group stages, and this was unthinkable. So Löw continued, however, because he'd built up a lot of credit, won the World Cup, and they carried on. And then you've got, well, Euro 2020, where which was actually held in 2021 because of COVID. They got knocked out by England in the quarterfinals 2-0, and then England went on to win that tournament. Anyway, enough about that. So Löw basically, after the Euro, he carried on for a bit, but he'd been in the job for, like, he hadn't been in the job since 2014. He'd been there since, I think, about 2006. So it was a long time. And so it was time for him to hang up. I'm not sure what the coaches hang up. Clipboard. Let's say clipboard. So he hangs up his clipboard, and this is in 2022, and they get Hansi Flick as their new manager. Now, Hansi Flick, he'd actually worked under Jogi Löw earlier, as a sort of assistant coach with the national team. But he'd actually more recently been managing Bayern, and that had gone very well that season, 2021 COVID season, anyway. And they won the Champions League. I think they did the treble. They won the Bundesliga. They got the Pokal. So hugely successful. And yeah, and he turned Bayern's season that season started particularly well. And in the Champions League, they ended up famously beating Barcelona 8-2. And then in the final of the Champions League, won 1-0 against Paris Saint-Germain, I believe, who, coincidentally enough, were managed by Thomas Tuchel. Okay, so he's got some credentials then, old Hansi Flick. And he takes them into the Qatar World Cup. And it's difficult because, as a whole, and this is the Winter World Cup. The Germans, as a whole, not all of them, but as a whole, they're uncomfortable about connections with, shall we say, certain regimes with possibly poor human rights records. So the Germans weren't particularly happy about the World Cup in Qatar, And there was a sort of there was a weird photo of the German national team covering their mouths because they weren't allowed to wear armbands, the rainbow armbands supporting LGBTQ plus. So anyway, so generally there wasn't a feeling of in the nation as a whole, oh, this is great, we're going to Qatar. But they got Hansi Flick as a manager, got some good players, and they're thinking, yeah, well, we might enjoy this if we get far. But unfortunately, they did not get very far, and they got knocked out in the group stages. And I think it was Japan that were largely responsible for that. So they're knocked out. But the other thing about this particular World Cup disaster was that they made an Amazon documentary, as you do, because let's document us winning the World Cup. Let's document it. This will be fantastic. But of course, with those documentaries, it's great if that happens. But if it doesn't go so well, kind of looks bad. And it did, and it looked particularly bad for Hansi Flick. And there's a famous kind of thing where he's talking about flocks of geese and all sorts of stuff, and the players sort of look completely nonplussed, and it's worth watching if you got Amazon. Have a peek at that. But anyway, yeah, it wasn't a good look. So eventually, the World Cup, they carry on with Hansi Flick because they think, well, we'll carry on with you because you're a good trainer. It's just, I don't know, unfortunate circumstances. We didn't really have that much interest in the World Cup anyway because it was in Qatar. So they carry on with Hansi Flick, and then they don't carry on with him because in 2023, the pesky Japanese again, they'd had a poor run of form, and then the Japanese in a friendly beat them 4-1. Ouch. And that was the end of Hansi Flick, and nobody's ever heard of Hansi Flick again. Oh wait, no, of course they have. They have heard of him because now he's managing Barcelona. Yeah, in Spain. Barcelona. You heard of them? Yeah, they all right, decent enough team. No, in fact, I josh with you. Yeah, they're one of the best teams in Europe. Hansi Flick's taken them over. Brilliant season last season. Very good chance that they'll win the Champions League this year. PSG, who knows? Anyway, the point is he's been very successful. But just to give you some sort of context in the German in the world of German football, most Germans, when they heard that Hansi Flick had been appointed, or at least German football commentators, when they heard Hansi Flick had been appointed to Barcelona, you what? What? Sorry, did I hear that right? So yeah, Hansi Flick had really, really damaged his reputation in Germany, but where he is now. So moving on, the German national team was then taken over by Julian Nagelsmann. Julian Nagelsmann, very young coach. I don't know how old he is now, but he's in his early 30s, I believe. And I think he started off at Hoffenheim, managed to get them Champions League place. He went on to Leipzig, came second in the Bundesliga, got them to the quarterfinals of the Champions League, where they lost to Paris Saint-Germain. That was the year Bayern won it, and lost 3-0 to Thomas Tuchel's Paris Saint-Germain. Now, what's sort of interesting there is that this successful season with Leipzig Um, he didn't stay with Leipzig, build that team, carry on. Bayern call. When Bayern call, generally you don't say no. So he gets the Bayern job. And he's the youngest coach, as far as I'm aware, very young coach to be taking on um, the biggest job in German football. Um, so he's kind of because Bayern are a very old-fashioned, so we say conservative with a small c club. Like they have their kind of modern business models and you know scouting models and all the rest of it, but deeply they're quite a conservative club, and Nagelsmann's a very kind of hip young happening, or when he hip young happening thing, seen as a bit of a laptop coach. So laptop coach, that kind of doesn't like to get his hands dirty. There he is with his laptop, looking at facts and figures, sort of coach. So in that respect, there was a bit of because Nagelsmann is a very tactically astute young coach. There's no doubt about that. He's um, so um, and there were things like, and this may seem irrelevant to you, but it's completely relevant to Bayern. He would arrive to training on a skateboard, or and he had his iPod Walkman in, and he was listening to the latest hip and happening sounds. I don't know what young people listen to these days, so I couldn't even tell you. But he's sort of a bit like a trendy trendy young teacher who's kind of, hey kids. And he was, I think he must be younger than Thomas Muller, who was still at Bayern then. So he's a young coach, comes in. In fairness to him, they just lost Robert Lewandowski and didn't replace him, or couldn't replace him. And it was okay. It was going okay-ish until after the winter break, in kind of sort of January time. And results didn't go their way. They ended up, I can't remember, I think it was Leverkusen beat them 2-1. And Nagelsmann immediately after that game went on a skiing holiday, because again, skiing, hip, young, trendy thing to do, holiday. And while he was on that skiing holiday, and this didn't go down well, by the way, like the idea that after a loss like that, you would go on holiday. I believe it was an international break. Not exactly sure. Was the hierarchy at Bayern were not best pleased about that, and they fired him. So Nagelsmann gets the sack, and Tuchel takes over. And there's all sorts of connect. And Tuchel had mentored Nagelsmann at Augsburg. Anyway, so where are we? Right. So he's lost his job at Bayern, but this is again, I think it's 2022, 23. He's lost his job at Bayern. Thomas Tuchel comes along, takes over. Now, it was kind of controversial getting rid of him because, it's that sort of thing where they say, well, a couple of bad results, it can happen. He's a young trainer. He leads to kind of learn. And he's brilliant. He's got a brilliant mind. He will modernise Bayern, because that's the other thing. Bring them into the kind of modern like techniques and the modern technical stuff and tactics. And tactics was the worst. When I said technique, I was trying to think of tactics, that kind of stuff, right? Very clever, all over that. So that's Nagelsmann. Hansi Flick, goodbye. Hello, Nagelsmann. And it looks like we found our man. Now I think he was initially appointed temporarily because the Germans knew they had the European Championship coming up, and they needed someone who could see them through that. And it wasn't necessarily the case that they thought Nagelsmann would carry on afterwards, but anyway, who knows what the future will bring. So Nagelsmann gets the job as German coach, and there's a few dodgy results here and there, but when he gets to the Euros, he has something, or has several things, in fact, that poor old Hansi Flick doesn't have. He has youth, he has good looks, and most importantly, he has Tony Kroos. Tony Kroos comes out of international retirement. I believe he retired after the 2018 World Cup. Said, "I've had enough. We've gone out. Not for me, lads. Just going to carry on in Madrid, doing my thing." But he knew he was going to retire from football altogether, and the European Championship was being held in Germany, and the Germans are, well, understandably, it's a very special thing for them to be hosting that tournament. And there's an assumption, if we're hosting it, we're going to win it. Tony Kroos, I'm all over that. Make good what happened in 2018. I'm back. And Tony Kroos is a brilliant footballer, brilliant midfielder. He has his limitations. He's not particularly physical. What he does particularly well, controls games, passing. He can pick a pass, and just that creativity that he has, and that really helped them out. And they got to, was it the, I don't have to think about this. I think it was quarterfinals. Got to the quarterfinals, where they met Spain. And Spain, fantastic teams. Though were the two teams that Spain and Germany seemed to be, where people were excited. Spain, Germany, and England. So they met, and what happened? Well, the Germans were robbed by Marc Cucurella. Yeah, the Germans hate Marc Cucurella because he stole the European Championship from them that year. 2024 was their year. And Marc Cucurella is as far as Germans are concerned, he's a massive cheat. Now, all Marc Cucurella did was stand in the penalty box and have a ball bounce against his hand. But the Germans haven't forgiven him, and you might have seen in the Nations League, every time he touched the ball, Nations League this year, when it was this year, every time he touched the ball, boo, Marc Cucurella, we hate you. So yeah, that's Cucurella. But no, obviously not. They lost the game 2-1, but there was a potential penalty shout, and yeah, the Germans, just let it go. Yeah, I mean, I don't still go on about Frank Lampard's goal that should have been a goal in South Africa, do I? Anyway, so yeah, Toni Kroos, and they look really good, and they got Florian Wirtz, they had Musiala, Josh Kimmich, good team. Could have won it. Would they faced England in the final? Would they have won? One would hope so. I mean, not from an English point of view, but from a footballing point of view, one would hope so. Okay, so let's fast forward to after the tournament, and Julian Nagelsmann has to do the press conference, and what went wrong, Julian? How did it? And one of the things he said was afterwards was it was Marc Cucurella's fault. No, he didn't say that. What he said was it hurts because we're going to have to wait another 2 years before becoming world champions. An arrogant German. Never heard of such a thing, have you? Okay, so you made a statement like that, and you want your manager to be confident, right? But unfortunately, things didn't go well this week. This week was the World Cup qualifiers, and Germany faced Slovakia and Northern Ireland, and they lost to Slovakia 2-0 away, and it was the first time that the Germans had lost an away World Cup qualifier in history, in the entire history of the world. They'd never lost one before. They'd lost other qualifiers. I think now it's like a total of 4 World Cup qualifiers out of God knows how many matches, 50, 100, I don't know. But they had a very good record away. And that's gone. And then they went back to Cologne and played Northern Ireland. Now, you probably aware, not the highest rated team. I don't think they've ever qualified for a major tournament, but obviously, George Best used to play for Northern Ireland. But anyway, they beat them 3-1, and so it was all fine, right? But no, it wasn't all fine. They beat them 3-1, but they really laboured to that win, and they really struggled for a large portion of that game. And it was where were we? They took the lead, and Northern Ireland got a goal back through a set piece, and it was a good goal, it was a good finish. And then they really laboured. They really struggled to create anything. I don't think they had a shot on target for something like half an hour. So it didn't look particularly good. And the other thing that didn't look particularly good was the change in formations that Nagelsmann made. And in the first game, they were so exposed. They had, in theory, 4 at the back, but they pushed their fullbacks forward very high, and it left them exposed at the back. And Jonathan Tah, and Tony Rudiger, kind of looked like clowns at the back. And they had a new player, Collins, from Eintracht Frankfurt, and he wasn't playing his natural position. They had him as the right back, and he had a lot of chasing back to do. And he, again, was it Leo Sauer, I think his name was? The left winger for Slovakia. Rang rings around him, and Rudiger as well was having problems at 2-0, and it just didn't look like they were going to get back in it. So he changes the formation for the next game. He drops Jonathan Tah. He goes to a back 3. He puts Anton from Dortmund and Koch from Eintracht Frankfurt in the back 3. Steadies the ship a little bit with that. But Northern Ireland aren't as good a team as Slovakia. So, not going to be as difficult a game. But he just, like I say, after the defeat to Slovakia, he kind of threw his players under a bus a bit. Talked about passion, he talked about motivation, and all these sort of things. And he kind of didn't say, I think I got my tactics wrong. And then what he was heavily criticised for was putting players in positions that they don't normally play. So it wasn't just Paul Collins on his debut and getting taken off at half time. It was also, for example, Leon Goretzka got put as number 10, which stood in his position. Serge Gnabry, who's been doing really well this season as a 10 at Bayern with Musiala out, was stuck on the right wing. Wirtz again was stuck out on the wing. Again, very good number 10. And Voltemade was put up front. Now, Voltemade's just gone to Newcastle. But Voltemade, I'm sorry to disappoint you, is not Alan Shearer. He's not Isaac. He is not. He's not someone who can. He's not a forward or a number 9 that can just be a sole number 9. He needs players around him. He likes to drop deeper, get involved in play. Dribbling, he's a brilliant dribbler. That's one of his skills. But they just bunged him up front on his own, and it didn't really happen for him because he just isn't. He looks like he should be an absolute, bully defenders kind of hold the ball up number 9 because he's really tall. What is he? I don't know, 6'6" or something. But he just isn't his game. Now, so yeah, again, criticising for putting players who don't play like that for their club in that position. And in the next, but again, in the next game when he went to a back 3 against Northern Ireland, he puts Rudiger on the right, where Rudiger at Chelsea had played in a back 3. He normally plays in a back 2, but he played in a back 3. Chelsea very successfully, as you might have known. And he played on the left in that back 3. But Anton in the middle and Koch on the left, but Koch normally would play in the middle of a 3. Anton would, if anything, prefer the right or the. So there were some strange decisions because that's kind of if you look at the things that certainly the things that he did in the World Cup. The World Cup, the European Championship. Nagelsmann fitted the team to the players. Now, in his defence, they are a bit thin on the ground, and they were a bit thin on the ground, and lots of players missing. Kai Havertz was missing. Schlotterbeck, the centre half, was missing. You might have seen him, and if you watch the game, he was sat with Mats Hummels up in the stands. So he's injured, but he's very good. He's kind of regarded as probably the best German centre back at the moment. Young, very good on the ball, Schlotterbeck. So there's missing Musiala, obviously, is out. And a lot of players have gone, like Manuel Neuer's gone, who was a towering figure. You cannot estimate how valuable or how highly thought of Manuel Neuer is in Germany. Like he's the best. He is the best keeper of all time. You won't argue with a German and say who's the best keeper of all time. They will say Manuel Neuer without question. Thomas Müller's gone again. I mean, he's getting to that sort of time, but again, not at the peak of his powers, obviously, but still a very influential leadership figure. And the other thing to say is Sandro Wagner's gone. Sandro Wagner was an assistant coach, and he's gone to Augsburg to take up his first proper job. But he is, unlike Nagelsmann, who never played at the highest level. He's played at the highest level, and he's very much emotionally in touch with. I mean, Nagelsmann talked about emotion and passion and whatever, but he's seen as Sandro Wagner is seen as a kind of connector between the players, or was seen as the connector between the players and Nagelsmann, because Nagelsmann's a bit. So he's probably a bit more distant between the players. And I was watching an interview with Sandro Wagner, and they were talking about. He was being asked about, how did the players react when you told them you were leaving the German team, and he said, it was very, it was so nice, their reactions and how kind they were, and he specifically picked out Rudiger and said he phoned me up and was just very complimentary, very nice, and very kind. So they were obviously missing him in that setup. That's something that's been removed, and overall the problem is that they're just not producing the players that they produced once. They just don't have. You can talk about a transition and the kind of old guard and blah blah blah, but the Germans are like they're fed up, or the public anyway are fed up with seeing Leon Goretzka in the national team. Leon Goretzka is basically their Jordan Henderson, um, and yeah, they you know the right back position is a real problem because they have potentially one of the best right backs in the world in their squad, Joshua Kimmich. But Nagelsmann said, and this has been a debate over the years, does he play at right back? And I think he played at right back when Kroos was in the team. But he's now stuck him in midfield and said, this is his play. And this is the position he's played with his club for a long time now. But they just don't have a decent right back, really. And yeah, they're just not. And for example, wingers, they really don't have world class wingers who can take people on, who can go, isolated one on one and just go around people and create things. I mean, players like Wirtz can do that, Musiala can do that, but they're central. So if you've got a block, it's harder for them to do that. You need wingers to do it, and the Germans just aren't producing them. They don't have, other than Kimmich, who is going to play midfield, a right back really of note, and they centre forward, and that's been a problem for years. Is centre forward? They've got Füllkrug. He did quite well at the Euros, and he's a very traditional centre forward. And it's a shame he got injured because he would have been really. I think he would have taken off at West Ham if he hadn't got injured, and he might still do. But he was injured. But they've just not produced. I mean, Kleindienst is potentially he's at Mönchengladbach, but he's injured at the moment. So there's all sorts of questions. But really, when it comes down to it, for example, it's also depth as well. So they've got injuries. But if you look at England, they had Madueke, who I should remember the Arsenal, or not the Arsenal fans. I shouldn't say that. A portion of so-called Arsenal fans saying, "Oh, we don't want him at our club." Absolutely brilliant, and he's not first choice. Saka's probably ahead of him, but again, the Germans would absolutely, like snap your arm off, or bite your hand off. I don't know what the expression is. If he said, "Oh, no, only when Madueke, we don't want him for England anymore, like we don't want him at Arsenal. Can you want him? Yeah, please. So yeah, it's interesting times ahead. Nagelsmann's been jobbed for 25 games, and that's the amount of time that Hansi Flick was in charge before he got let go. Can Nagelsmann turn it around? Who knows? But this is the problem. I think it's the players. I think Nagelsmann, to a certain extent, is still in club mode when it comes to managing a national team because it is different, and you have to simplify things. And he's got a very good, a good tactical brain. And therefore it might be too difficult for him to just go, this is the kind of thing that we all criticism of Southgate for, just keep it simple and blah blah, and I understandably so, because it was so dull. But Nagelsmann's playing dull football. He's not getting results, and it seems like he's overcomplicating things. He really needs probably to go back to basics if he keeps his job. Okay, so that's my thoughts on the crisis in the German national team, and I will see you in the next video. Thank you very much for watching. Goodbye.